It's Tuesday, October 18. In the headlines, 221 Jamaicans were recognized for their contribution to nation building. Regionally, Grenada establishes minimum wage board to review wages. In sports, Sunshine Girls defeat Team USA 70-16. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. 221 Jamaicans were recognized for their contribution to nation building at the National Honors and Awards presentation and investiture ceremony on Monday. 6 persons were presented with the Badge of Honor for Gallantry, while 29 received the Badge of Honor for Meritorious Service. The heroic Jamaicans who were awarded the Badge of Honor were recognized for their courage and selflessness that led to the preservation of life.
To Mr. Jeffrey Lloyd Boyne. On July 31, 2020, sometime after 7 p.m., Mr. Boyne noticed a young boy fighting to stay afloat in crocodile-infested waters in Bridgeport, St. Catherine. After several failed attempts to call out to the boy, Mr. Boyne jumped into the water and rescued him. Mr. Clark saw a young schoolgirl as the lone passenger inside the vehicle, being pulled by her neck by the driver. He also noticed that one of her legs was hanging out of the vehicle while it was still in motion. With quick thinking, he engaged in a high-speed chase, following every turn while blowing his horn to warn the taxi driver that his plan had been discovered. After several failed attempts to throw off his pursuer, the taxi driver flung the girl from the taxi on Mountain View Avenue. Mr. Clark and his co-workers then took the girl to the police station where the matter was reported and the girl was handed over to the police. Mr. Thorpe and a companion saw a policeman lying on the ground. He approached the policeman to discover that he'd been shot the day before and had life-threatening injuries. Mr. Thorpe and his companion contacted the police station and stayed with the injured policeman until help arrived. For exemplary heroism in saving the life of a police officer, Mr. Winston Anthony Thorpe.
10 awardees were conferred with the membership in the Order of Jamaica. 30 were made members of the Order of Distinction Commander Class, while another group of awardees were given the Order of Distinction Officer Class. 30 were awarded the Badge of Honor for long and faithful service in areas such as community development, community service, education, nursing, dentistry, and public service. 78 members of the uniformed groups representing the Jamaica Defence Force, Jamaica Constabulary Force, the Department of Correctional Service, and Jamaica Fire Brigade were given the Medal of Honor for Meritorious Service. Jamaicans are being urged to respect each other's right to life. Prime Minister Andrew Holness voiced those words during his message to the nation on National Heroes Day, October 17.
Marcus Garvey said it. If we as a people realize the greatness from which we came, we would be less likely to disrespect ourselves. Let us agree not to shed the blood of our brothers and sisters and to resolve conflicts peacefully. Let us agree to support and nurture our children, to set examples for them to grow into whole, happy adults who will lead upstanding lives. Let us agree to take care of our elders and vulnerable ones. Let us agree to follow the rules of the road, the rules of our schools and institutions, and the laws of our country. Let us agree to protect our environment and dispose of our waste appropriately. Let us agree to respect each other's right to enjoy property and pursue economic livelihood in peace and security.
Reflecting on the collective vision of Jamaica's 7 national heroes, he urged citizens to work together towards building a better country for the future generation.
As we reflect this Heroes Day on those who came before us, forging a path for us with their sweat, tears, and ultimately their lives, what will be our commitment to ourselves and to the generations that will follow us? In the words of Sir Alexander Bustamante, Let us resolve to work together under the law to build a Jamaica which will last and of which we and the generations to follow may be proud.
Opposition leader Mark Golding says Jamaicans must continue to acknowledge the immense contribution of their national heroes as they contributed to the freedom we enjoy today.
We acknowledge and revere their immense and lasting contributions to the independence and development of modern Jamaica. We draw on their strength and determination so that we too will stand up for justice and demand the very best of our leaders.
He says Jamaicans should also acknowledge everyday heroes.
Our parents, who face the daily challenges of providing for their families and do so with pride and dignity. Our teachers, who work in such challenging circumstances to prepare our children to achieve their hopes and dreams in the future. Our doctors and nurses, who work in adverse conditions to care for the sick and bring them back to health. Our police, soldiers, and firefighters, who face dangers to their own lives to enforce the law and to keep us safe. Our civil servants, who live a life of service to our great nation. Our farmers, our business people, who grow our food and provide the goods and services we rely on. Our youth, who represent hope for the future and the resilience of our people.
In other news, Cabinet has approved the award of a contract to Astrom Building Systems Limited for the provision of housing solutions in Tower Hill, St. Andrew. Minister without portfolio with responsibility for information in the office of the Prime Minister, Robert Morgan, made the announcement at the last post-cabinet press briefing held at Jamaica House.
That contract is valued at $286 million, and that was approved by Cabinet as well. It will see the construction of 16 apartment units, 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom, 8 duplex townhouse units, 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, on 1.6 hectares, which is 4 acres of land. And this is located, as I said earlier.
He says the Cabinet also gave approval for the award of a contract for F1 atmospheric pipe still furnace replacement for Petrojam. Each year, approximately 5.2 million people die from non-communicable diseases, NCDs. The countries of the region of the Americas have committed to reduce premature mortality by NCD by 1/3 by 2030. What are they doing to work towards this goal? The following video explains why non-communicable diseases pose a threat to countries in the region of the Americas. It explores the main strategies to prevent them, like reducing associated risk factors and improving the control and care of people who suffer from them.
Cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, cancer, and chronic respiratory diseases are known as non-communicable diseases. In recent years, these diseases have increased as a result of population aging, urbanization, globalization, and changes in lifestyles, and they've become the great epidemic of our age. Non-communicable diseases can largely be prevented by adopting a healthy lifestyle, but to do so requires more than simply personal determination. For example, when wholesome food is more expensive and less available than junk food. When physical activity is a challenge because the parks and recreation areas are not safe or properly equipped. Or when it's hard to quit smoking or drinking because advertising of these products seems to be all around us. That is why laws and regulations are needed to make the healthy choice the easiest choice. Without these laws and regulations, more and more people will develop a non-communicable disease and need lifelong treatment that could ruin them financially. But there's still time to stop this epidemic from growing, and some countries in the Americas have already taken action by, for example, reformulating processed foods to make them healthier, informing consumers about the nutrition content of packaged foods, making more fresh foods available, regulating the sale of junk food in schools, as well as providing free drinking water, increasing taxes on tobacco, alcohol, and sugar-sweetened beverages, facilitating access to quit smoking programs, banning tobacco use in enclosed public spaces, and limiting the advertising of cigarettes, alcohol, and junk food. Creating opportunities for physical activity, including creating recreational bicycle paths and promoting the use of public transportation. Governments should ensure access to health services for its population, including access to early detection of disease, diagnosis, medicines, and treatment provided without discrimination and without undue financial hardship. People should be provided with information and support that empowers them to manage their own health, giving them greater control over their health and contributing to the health of their families. This way, all together, we can stop this terrible epidemic from getting worse and enjoy longer, more productive lives. Healthy public policies and healthy lifestyles are the prescription to prevent and control non-communicable diseases. Please share this information, and if you want to find out more, visit our website.
Stay with us. We have news from the world of business in the Business Report with Danita Rodney.
The government has signed a financial advisory services agreement with the International Finance Corporation amounting to approximately $800 million to develop the North Coast Highway project. The agreement was signed by Minister of Finance and the Public Service Dr. Nigel Clark and IFC Managing Director Maktar Diop. Under the FASA, the IFC will provide full-service advisory that assists the government in all steps of the project structuring and implementation. For your market updates, in foreign exchange trading for Friday, October 14, the US dollar sold for an average of $153.70. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $111.06. The pound sterling traded for $170.82, and the euro sold for an average of $151.56. In GSE trading, the GSE index declined by 358 points. The junior market index advanced by 21 points. The combined market index declined by 143 points, and the All Jamaican Composite Index declined by 500 points. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 106 stocks, of which 46 advanced, 47 declined, and 13 traded firm. Stocks advanced for Access Financial Services Limited, Barita Investments Limited, and CAC 2000 9.5% cumulative redeemable preference shares. Stocks declined for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited Viable Preference, and 1834 Investments Limited. Trading firm were Blue Power Group Limited, Siboney Group Limited, and Epley 7.50% preference shares due 2024. The overall volume leaders were Edufocal Limited with over 2 million units, AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited, and Trans-Jamaican Highway Limited with over 1 million units. In regional stocks, in Trinidad and Tobago, Clico Investment Fund posted over 30,000 shares. And on the Barbados Stock Exchange, Epley Caribbean Property Fund Development Fund traded 7,000 shares. In regional business, Grenada has successfully negotiated a debt settlement agreement with Libya to clear long-standing arrears. More from GBN News.
Government said it successfully negotiated the settlement of $5 million in long-standing debt arrears owed to the state of Libya. These debts were contracted in the 1980s by the People's Revolutionary Government. Long-standing unresolved debt arrears to Libya, Algeria, and Trinidad and Tobago have adversely affected Grenada's credit rating, placing the country in the category of Selected Default, or SD. Government said it will continue to make concerted efforts to resolve the remaining debt arrears to Algeria and Trinidad and Tobago, respectively, as regularization of these arrears will greatly assist in unlocking financial resources needed to support government's transformational agenda. This settlement agreement was signed in Washington, D.C. on Thursday by Libya's Minister of Finance, His Excellency Dr. Khalid Al-Mubrak Abdallah, and Grenada's Minister of Economic Development, Planning, Tourism, ICT, and the Creative Economy, Lennox Andrews, on behalf of Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Deacon Mitchell. Lennox Andrews is currently in Washington, D.C., attending the 2022 Annual International Monetary Fund meetings.
In market data for oil prices were stable as the market balanced cuts to OPEC production quotas against fears of an economic slowdown and a lower Chinese fuel demand. Brent crude futures eased by 7 cents to $91.55 a barrel, while West Texas Intermediate crude futures were down 12 cents at $85.34. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Danita Rodney.
In Grenada, the government has established a minimum wage board to review wages in the country and pave the way forward in addressing issues that hinder improvements in the standard of living in the country. More in this report.
Economist Colin Gilchrist will chair government's Wage Advisory Committee in an attempt to address the issue of minimum wage. The other members of the committee are members of the labor movement Justin Campbell, Celie Brown, Brian Grimes, Trevor Xavier, George Mason, Cicely Gabriel, Anne-Marie Montrose, Janine Vieweg, and Lyden Lewis. Legal Affairs and Labour Minister Claudette Joseph said government is committed to reviewing and finding a solution to the issue of minimum wage, especially within the public service, to address an issue ignored for over 10 years.
Greater economic independence of all peoples, opportunities for wealth creation, that goes for employer and employees, and a better standard of living for all. We would want to become a nation where the people who are classified as poor still enjoy a decent quality of life with a decent roof over their head and the ability to comfortably meet their expenses, their living expenses as they fall due, to comfortably have their children educated.
Minister Joseph met with members of the committee last Wednesday. The committee is expected to work closely with the labor movement to create a culture of independence and eliminate poverty.
Review and make recommendations for the adjustment in the minimum wage payable to workers in the stated category in the orders. But I would like to expand that to include, to have your mandate include giving advice on whether the minimum wages order itself should be updated to embrace all the categories of workers, and also any other recommendations that can be made to help in this regard with the relationship between worker and employer.
The development of the committee is yet another of the new government's campaign promise to improve the lives of Grenadians.
In Barbados, there is an urgent need for solidarity and justice to conquer the global crisis brought on by the dire economic challenges the world is presently facing with respect to food, fuel and financing. That's according to Prime Minister Mia Mottley as she spoke during the 2022 Afreximbank Babacar Ndeye 6th Annual Lecture.
The situation that we face is so dire that the Secretary General of the United Nations has established a global crisis response group. And mercifully, that global crisis response group does include the President of the African Union and myself, along with 4 other heads of government. That global crisis response group is intended to meet the coincidence of crises between food, fuel, and financing.
In Guyana, President Dr. Ifran Ali has made another fervent appeal for adequate climate financing, underscoring that vulnerable countries like Guyana need more money to fight the climate crisis and meet their food needs.
Investment in climate financing rebounds to the benefit of a more resilient agricultural sector. Climate adaptation financing is absolutely essential and foundational for establishing climate-resilient agricultural sectors, in small island, developing, and low-lying coastal states. Without climate adaptation, the agricultural sectors of SIDS and low-lying coastal states will be continuously prone to climate risk. At COP26, certain pledges were made to boost adaptation financing, but as I have alluded to elsewhere, the level of financing promised by the developed countries will be inadequate to close the adaptation gap. And without climate financing, the agricultural sectors of SIDS and low-lying coastal states will be challenged to attract investment for production and productivity. An increase in climate finance by at least 590% is needed. Adaptation finance remains far below the scale necessary to respond to existing and future climate change.
In the Bahamas, after a month of efforts to acquire monkeypox vaccines, a batch of 1,400 arrived in New Providence Monday afternoon.
British Airways has frequent flights into Nassau, but today's flight carried some special cargo, the Bahamas' first batch of monkeypox vaccines. So the monkeypox vaccines have arrived, but there are only 1,400, and the experts say they're not going to be delivered to the public in the same way as COVID vaccines.
The reason why the amount is so small compared to what you would have heard for COVID is because it's not going to be rolled out the same way. It's not a mass vaccination campaign. It's for persons who are suspected to have been exposed. So basically, it's a good thing that they are here. We need them to be here in case they're needed. But it's kind of like insurance. We actually hope that the country never has to use them.
The Ministry of Health has been in talks with PAHO about acquiring these vaccines since early summer.
It's been a long time coming. Last week I spoke with the media. I had an idea when it was coming, but we wanted to make sure, and today on British Airways, the vaccine is here. The vaccine will be moved from here to the proper storage site, and our teams will be responsible to administer to the high-risk groups and individuals that may have been exposed. You know, when we talk about high-risk groups, we're talking about people who might have been potentially exposed. We have the MSM group in the community. We also have other groups that we believe that may be at high risk. But as Dr. Busan said, this is not like COVID where everyone needs to be vaccinated. It is basically those groups that are at high risk.
But the high-risk group is not limited to the MSM population, Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharita Moxie reminds the public.
Also in the healthcare settings, those that are likely to come in contact with somebody who is infected. So for example, some of our laboratory personnel, persons who do contact tracing, clinicians who serve at the bedside of persons who would be infected. So certainly our rollout will target those populations. And as he would have said, we will give more details about that rollout in the coming days.
Stored correctly, these vaccines will remain viable until 2027.
In international news, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says action is needed to end the blockade of a key port by gangs to allow fuel and aid to reach Haiti. Thousands of people have protested in the capital of Haiti as the United Nations discuss measures to address the country's dire security crisis. Al Jazeera's diplomatic editor, James Bays, reports.
Protesters in the Haitian capital Port-au-Prince angry at the idea that foreign troops could once again be deployed to their country.
We are making President Biden remember the promise he made when he knelt in front of the Haitian community in the United States. He asked them to vote for him so that the situation in Haiti would change. But they did not vote for him to have a president who was assassinated.
Haiti has a troubled history, but the situation has rarely been as grave as this. It's a place crippled by violence and disease. Cholera is spreading. More than 20 people have died. Many more have contracted the disease. There is an economic, food and fuel crisis too. The UN says 19,000 people in the capital are living in famine conditions. There are shortages of fresh water. Some hospitals are preparing to close. And the main fuel depot is blockaded by armed gangs which roam the streets of the city. That's why the UN Secretary-General says the only solution is a strike force made up of international troops and police.
In the present circumstances, we need an armed action to release the port and to allow for a humanitarian corridor to be established.
The gang that's blockading the fuel depot is led by this man, Jimmy Shalzay, known by his nickname Barbecue, who Al Jazeera filmed earlier in the year. He and other gang leaders could soon be subject to Security Council sanctions. The US is drawing up 2 draft Security Council resolutions, one to authorise an international force, the other to target gang leaders like Shalzay.
He is directly responsible for the devastating fuel shortage that is crippling the country. By passing this resolution, we would take concrete actions to hold him and so many other violent criminals to account.
There are still many unanswered questions. The US is drawing up the 2 resolutions, one of which would create the international force, but would it contribute to it, and which other countries would do so? It's also not clear how other members of the Security Council will respond to this idea. Already, China and Russia are expressing reservations. The view of the Haitian people is also important. The protest that took place on the streets of Port-au-Prince at exactly the same time the Security Council was meeting may prove sobering for some. A number of people were carrying Russian flags as they protested a new international intervention. They even brought a coffin, a symbol, they said, of what will happen to foreign troops if they're deployed here.
In sports, Jamaica's Sunshine Girls defeated Team USA 70-16 in their America's Netball Regional Qualifier at the National Indoor Sports Center on Monday. Amanda Pickney led the scoring for the Sunshine Girls, dropping in 22 goals from 24 attempts. Giselle Allison scored 23 goals. Her teammate Kelsey Jones 12 and Captain Janelle Fowler scored 13 goals in the first quarter. Jamaica, who are using the qualifiers as preparation for the Netball World Cup next year, are winning their second game by a big margin. The West Indies had an appalling start to their T20 World Cup campaign as they were thrashed by Scotland by 42 runs in Hobart. Here are the details.
Batting first, the Scots, who played only 2 T20s since their last World Cup in 2021, mounted an imposing 160 for 5 from their 20 overs. George Munsey anchored the innings, getting to 66 not out. Jason Holder, the standout bowler, grabbing 2 for 14 from his 4 overs, supported by Alzari Joseph, who took 2 wickets. Responding to what should have been an easy task, the West Indies looked listless in their run chase. Limping at 79 for 7, Jason Holder tried to correct the malpractice from the Windies batters, but the load was simply too heavy to bear. He was eventually dismissed for a standout 38, with the Windies tumbling to 118 all out. This result means the West Indies, who are ranked 7th in the world, will likely need to win both of their remaining games to progress. Their next match is against Zimbabwe on Wednesday night.
Following West Indies' defeat by the Scots, head coach Phil Simmons reflected on the loss at the post-match media conference.
The West Indies were on track in the run chase, but a familiar event took place, the collapse.
I think the only word you can look for is disappointed. I think that our batting, at least today, definitely was a bit unprofessional, and we need to wake up and start being as professional as we can be when we're batting. The bowlers seem to be working hard and putting us in good positions, but the batters continue to falter. Too many soft dismissal. I think as batsmen you have to pay a lot more attention to your wicket, and I think every time we play we're up there with the run rate. Doesn't matter who we're playing against, but we keep losing wickets and soft wickets. So I think we've been trying to remedy it for the last couple of months. Doesn't seem like it's there yet.
Zimbabwe is up next on Wednesday, and the coach welcomes the short turnaround time.
A day tomorrow to just rest and reflect on how things went, what we have to change, and how we have to think in the next game. Because, as someone said, we've been out there, we've been hitting balls, we've been practicing scenarios, we've been thinking about it. It's now to put it into play.
Simmons is clear on what is needed if the two-time champions are to advance to the Super 12 stage.
We need to beat Zimbabwe, so I think that's the first step. As we go along, when we get back here on at this time on Wednesday, then we may be thinking a lot different.
The West Indies won the last 2 internationals versus Zimbabwe, which were contested in 2013 at North Sound in Antigua. Wayne Cunningham, TTT Sport.
And that's it for news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. You can follow us on our social media platforms at PBCJamaica. Thanks for watching.